The 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. The Democratic race for Lieutenant Governor.
Good afternoon. I'm Russ Spencer, evening news anchor with Fox 5 Atlanta, and welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is the debate among the Democratic candidates for Lieutenant Governor. Let's meet the candidates now. They are in alphabetical order. Sarah Riggs Amico is the executive chairperson of Jack Cooper, the largest vehicle carrier company in North America. And Triana Arnold James is the founder of the Susan Jolly Awareness Program, which brings awareness and education to women on the impact and prevention of cervical cancer. Now let's meet our panelists. Faith Abube is a reporter and anchor with WXIA TV, and Sandra Parrish covers Gwinnett and the state capitol for WSB Radio. Now let's get started. For the rules of today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website. That's atlantapressclub.org. And to start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by one of the panelists. And Sandra Parrish, you get the first question to Sarah Riggs Amico.
Hi, Ms. Amico. Clearly, you're a successful businesswoman, and I'm wondering, though, with no political experience, how you'll be able to translate that to preside over a Senate that is predominantly male and majority Republican.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Russ and Faith, and thank you to the Atlanta Press Club for the opportunity to be here today. I am a first-time candidate for political office, but I am in no way new to problem solving, to managing large and complex organizations, or to bringing people from a variety of sides of an issue together to solve a problem. In fact, in my business, that's what I spend the majority of my time doing. And the other side of being a first-time candidate is that I don't bring any baggage into this race. I bring an action-oriented, results-demanding perspective on leadership, and I bring into this race executive management skills that can help bridge gaps across the aisle and truly solve the problems that are impacting Georgia families.
Thank you. Faith Abube, your question for Triana Arnold James.
Hi, Ms. Arnold James. You've said on the campaign trail, as well as on your website, that you support cutting taxes here in the state of Georgia. Earlier this year, the General Assembly lowered income tax rate from 6 to 5.5%. Some have argued that it's still too high. How low would you like to see it, and how would the state of Georgia pay for that?
Well, I would like to see taxes being cut, yes, especially for the working class, the working middle class. The working middle class is suffering, paying high taxes, as well as trying to take care of their families, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to take care of our families and have more take-home pay rather than giving more money to the government. But I do understand that we do need to pay taxes, but I feel like some of the taxes need to go to, most of the taxes need to go to our education system. And I think that with everything that we have and we have going on in the state of Georgia, with our surplus, we would be able to pay for those, the lack of taxes that we're getting from the Georgia people.
You think the surplus is large enough to compensate for the people you're talking about not paying more tax?
Yes, I do believe that.
All right. That concludes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to their opponent. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, Sarah Riggs Amico, you may ask the first question.
Thank you very much. Triana, we're both residents of Cobb County, and we know that one of the most important issues in the state legislature this year was that of Metro Atlanta area transit. Cobb County has historically had a difficult time joining the party with T-Splost and extension of Metro transit options so that our citizens can benefit from economic development also in Metro Atlanta. How would you propose to build consensus among our lawmakers, particularly the Cobb County delegation and commissioners, and what would you like to see as the outcome for transit options from Cobb County into Metro Atlanta?
I think that, and thank you, Sarah, for your question. I think that we need to expand that transit. I believe that if everyone have a seat at the table, and all parties merging together, we would be able to expand that transit, as well as infrastructure. We need to make sure that areas such as Smyrna, but not just Smyrna, but rural Georgia as well, have access to transit. Because when they have access to transit, then they are able to get back and forth to jobs. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to work and take care of our families. And we need to make sure that we have access to infrastructure and transit as well as broadband.
Ms. Amico, you have 30 seconds to respond.
As the executive of a large transportation and logistics company, I know how sticky and impactful for families these issues can be. As your next Lieutenant Governor, I would work tirelessly to make sure that every corner of Georgia, but most particularly the metro Atlanta and suburban areas, have the transit options they need so that economic development in our state can truly lift all families into their version of the American dream.
Ms. Arnold James, your turn to ask a question.
Sarah, you have been on the Democratic ticket, but you have not acted in a Democratic way. Why did you support candidates that supported Donald Trump, that opposed abortion and women productive rights, sponsored anti-gay religious freedom bill, H.R. 2802, and you've donated thousands to Republican candidates? So, but you're on the Democratic ticket. Why is that?
I'm a proud Democrat. I've actually donated many, many times more to Democratic candidates over my lifetime than I ever have to Republicans. But it is true that from time to time I've supported candidates across the aisle. In fact, that was usually somebody I thought was of good character, with sound policies that would move our country forward, would bring our people together to solve real problems. I can't say that I've ever supported a candidate who supported Donald Trump, but I will say this. You know, I don't think the enemy of democracy in our country or in our state is another party. I don't think it's another candidate. I don't even think it's Donald Trump. Even though I don't think he's particularly good for democracy, he's not the enemy. The enemy is apathy. The enemy is the lack of engagement on the part of everyday citizens and the lack of candidates who are truly willing to sit down and solve the problems that affect our families. That is what we're fighting against. And in my campaign, I pledge to focus on building the people of Georgia up and not tearing each other down.
All right. Ms. Arnold James, you have 30 seconds to respond.
And I'm, too, about building people up. But you have to be held accountable. You have to be true to what you stand on. And everything that you have done up until you've gotten on the Democratic ticket, you have been Republican. And you even voted against President Obama. You've donated, and as late as November 2016, you've donated to Republican candidates. And you voted for Republican candidates.
Ms. Arnold James, thanks very much. That concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is the debate between the Democratic candidates for Lieutenant Governor. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidate of her choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask some questions of the candidates. I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. And Faith Abube, you get the first question in this round.
I would like to hear from both of you, if that's okay. Are you in favor of allowing same-sex couples to adopt in the state of Georgia?
Absolutely. I am very proud to have the endorsement of two of Georgia's largest LGBTQ organizations, Georgia Equality and the Georgia Stonewall Democrats. And to my opponent's earlier question, I'm also very proud to have the endorsement of Georgia's largest pro-choice organization, the Georgia Win List. I believe that couples who want to give a loving home to foster children in this state should be able to do so regardless of who they come home to as a partner in the evening. You know, I will also say this. The AJC reported a couple of weeks ago that we now have 15,000 children in foster care in Georgia. It's the highest number in our history. And while that problem was developing, our state Senate, under the guidance of the current Lieutenant Governor, was busy trying to discriminate against loving couples that wanted to give a home to these children. That kind of discriminatory nonsense will not happen on my watch. I am very proud to be pro-equality. I have been way ahead of the Democratic Party on this issue, and I will continue to lead the fight for equality for our LGBTQ friends.
Ms. Arnold James?
I have always been a supporter of the LGBTQIA community. It is important that we have that. I have been an advocate for ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment, which will include extra protection for the LGBTQIA community. And to me, as a veteran, I don't care who you love or what you look like. kids just want to be loved. And I have been with kids. I have volunteered at different, a lot of nonprofit organizations that deal with different kids. And the bottom line is they just want to be loved. They don't care if it's a man and a man, woman and a woman. The LGBTQIA community should have the same benefit and the right as everyone else, because at the end of the day, we are part of the human race, and that's all.
Sandra Parrish, it's your turn.
And this is for Ms. Arnold James.
Thank you.
You're an Army veteran, so thank you for your service.
Thank you for your support.
The state legislature passed a bill this year that expands Georgia's medical marijuana law, and it adds to it PTSD and chronic pain, and it also creates a study committee that would look at in-state cultivation. My first question is your thoughts on adding PTSD, because I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, serving in the Army, and as well as your thoughts on in-state cultivation.
PTSD has been on the rise, especially among veterans. And there's a lot of veterans, and I believe that two words should not go together. It's homeless veterans. There's a lot of veterans that have mental issues and deserve the opportunity to be taken care of. And I am glad that they have passed a law for medical marijuana to include PTSD, because it is very much needed. We need to make sure we take care of our veterans. And I signed that dotted line that I will defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And as far, give me your second question again, I'm sorry.
So the second part of that bill also studies in-state cultivation so they could grow medical marijuana here to provide access for those who can use it.
I wholeheartedly support that. I wish we would have done that, followed the same line as Colorado did, and because not only will it help the economy and help mental health issues, but it'll also bring money to funds to the state of Georgia. And that's what we need. We need funds, and we need jobs, and we need to make sure we take care of our veterans.
All right. Faith Abube, your turn to ask a question.
All right, Ms. Amico, your website says that there's no excuse for second-rate schools in the state of Georgia. We know an essential part of building great schools is hiring great teachers. Currently, a report by the Georgia Department of Education says 44% of all new teachers will be gone within the first 5 years, low salary being part of that problem. What specifically would you do to support addressing this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'm a proud public school graduate. That education gave me the opportunity for a girl from the Ozarks to go all the way to the Harvard Business School. So I know how important education is in creating opportunity. I'm a proud public school parent. I have a daughter in first grade in Cobb County schools and a little one who starts kindergarten on August 1st. I'm also the granddaughter of a teacher who worked for more than 20 years in public schools. And what I can say is this: teachers are literally the only profession in our nation that I can think of who are not compensated commensurate with the value that they create for our society. I think we need to come up with a funding formula for our public schools that fully funds our public education system, not just for the 12 months that our state legislature and Governor Deal did this year, but in a sustainable and perpetual manner. We should be paying teachers to receive additional training and incremental certifications. We should be focusing on giving them the supplies and budgets they need so that our children can go to school and focus on realizing their God-given potential, not cowering in a closet somewhere, hiding in an active shooter drill.
All right, time's up. Thank you. Sandra, your turn.
And this is for Ms. Amico. You've been an advocate for health insurance for your employees, and you've been very vocal about that on your website. And I'm wondering how you would have handled the recent breakdown in negotiations between Piedmont Healthcare and Blue Cross Blue Shield when 600,000 state employees nearly found themselves having to pay out-of-network costs until that was resolved.
Yeah, so I'm very proud to say that my company, even though we grew from 2008, we had 120 employees, to over 3,500 today, and despite the Great Recession, despite the bankruptcies of GM and Chrysler, two of our largest customers, even during those difficult moments, my company is committed to paying 100% of every single employee's health insurance premiums, not just for the employee, but for them, for their spouse, and their children. This is an important issue. I need to know that the people are coming coming to work every day, aren't worried about whether or not they're facing financial hardship, simply to provide their families with the health insurance they need. So I was excited to see that the governor brought both parties to the table, but candidly, I think it's the legacy of Republican mismanagement of Georgia's healthcare system that has gotten us to this place to begin with. We have 63 counties in Georgia without a pediatrician, 79 without an OBGYN, and because of a brazen decision not to expand Medicaid in our state, 6 rural hospitals closed just in the last 5 years. We need to expand Medicaid, and we need to expand the number of providers providing insurance to Georgians.
Time's up. Thank you very much. Ms. Arnold, James, I want to ask you a question about money in this race. Both your opponent in this primary and the 3 Republicans on the other side have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for their effort. As of the end of March, you had raised less than $10,000. Why should voters think that you're taking this entirely seriously when, unfortunately, money is part of the equation in running for office?
Well, because I have an unpopular stand. We need to get big money out of politics. I think that politicians today are making decisions based on the pocket and not based on the people. I don't have big endorsements, and that's fine because I'm endorsed by the people. I have been called the people's candidate, and it's not about money to me. It's about getting to the voters and listening to real people with real issues and listening and understanding as well. So I have fundraised for a lot of organizations, and I could go out there and fundraise. But to me, it's not about big money. We need to get big money out of politics, and it's about the people. And it's time for people to have someone that's going to stand up for the people. I am endorsed by the people of the state of Georgia, and I'm proud of that.
All right. Faith Abube, your turn to ask a question.
This question is for you, Ms. Arnold James. Again, thank you so much for your service. As a veteran who's fought for our rights and our Constitution, would you support allowing teachers who have a license to carry a gun to bring that gun into the classroom?
No. I think that we need to be arming teachers with resources and funds and not with guns. Why? Because I believe that our teachers do a lot already. They're counselors, they're mothers, they're fathers, they're, in addition to being a teacher, they don't need to be the police as well. If we want to talk about safety in our school, I started a petition on change.org for buzz doors in the high schools. After Sandy Hook, we got buzz doors in the elementary school and the middle school, but the high schools did not get them. And so I started that petition, and I have been sending it to everyone that I could think of so that we can get buzz doors in the state of Georgia for high schools and more resource officers as well. Our teachers do a lot already. And one of the main things, we need to give them a livable wage. We can give them a pay raise, but if it's not a livable wage, then how are they going to take care of their own family?
Sandra Parrish?
This is for Miss Amico. The Me Too movement has been front and center in the news this past year, and even the state legislature, both the House and Senate, have taken action on a new sexual harassment policy for lawmakers as well as lobbyists. And I'm curious your thoughts on the policies that were put in place this year, as well as the movement itself.
Well, I continue to be disappointed, Sandra, that our state legislature has carved our state senators and state representatives out of the state's open records or sunshine laws. The reality is there is a gentleman running for lieutenant governor on the other side of the aisle who has been accused of sexual harassment by a longtime lobbyist. And while he was found to be more likely that he didn't do it than that he did by a committee of his peers and an independent investigator, the reality is those proceedings are closed to the public. The people don't have a right to know. We don't have a right to see how those decisions are made. And as the AJC later reported, it turned out that this gentleman had donated over $30,000 in campaign contributions to the members of that committee who found him to be not guilty of those charges. It is absolutely clear to me that the Me Too movement is not here in full in Georgia. And as your next lieutenant governor, I will commit to doing everything in my power to making these accusations, processes, and settlements, which currently can use taxpayer dollars, transparent and privately funded by the legislators that are accused.
Faith Abube.
And again, I would like to hear from both of you on this question. A part of being a good candidate is knowing what your opponent stands for. Is there one issue your opponent is running on that you wholeheartedly agree on how they plan to fix it?
I'm happy to start. I actually agree with Triana that we do need to pay our teachers more. I agree that they need to be paid what they're worth. It's something she and I have agreed on from the beginning. I agree with the increased safety, arming teachers with the kind of supplies they need to perform their job to the best of their abilities and to let our children truly reach their potential, as opposed to arming them with guns. So on that issue, I think we're very much aligned. I think, the one thing I would say is we do need to have a common set of facts as we make policies. We need to understand truth from untruth. And the one thing that I would be concerned about is that we haven't always had that in our political debate here in Georgia.
Ms. Arnold James?
The only thing that my opponent has talked about was business. And I believe that, I believe when she says about business, but business is not always the answer. We need to deal with real people with real issues. So I do believe that we need jobs, but in order to have jobs, we need to expand Medicaid. We need to make sure that businesses are in rural Georgia. She doesn't talk about rural Georgia. I have been to over 65 counties, and mostly in rural Georgia, because I believe that rural Georgia is suffering the most, where the hospitals are closing down. So if you want to talk about business, expand Medicaid and take it to rural Georgia.
Would you like to respond to that, Ms. Amico?
I would. I grew up in rural Southwest Missouri. I, too, have spent a vast majority of my time campaigning in our rural states. But more importantly, I've faced the problems that rural Georgia has growing up. I remember what it was like when the last neurologist left my hometown. I have a grandmother with trigeminal neuralgia. It's a condition that requires treatment by a neurologist. Furthermore, I've grown up building businesses, including some smaller businesses. I know what it takes to revitalize Main Street. I have a 15-year track record of doing exactly that. And many of my employees across this country live in those same kind of small towns. Rural Georgia matters a great deal to me.
Well, let me ask you this, because you've talked about your business acumen, but you've lived in the state of Georgia for fewer than 10 years, as I understand it. So why should the people of Georgia entrust you with the second most powerful position in state government, President of the Senate, when one could argue that you don't know the state as well as others who've been here longer?
You know, it's interesting to hear this. It's a fair question. I haven't been here as a lifetime Georgia resident, but in many ways, I represent a lot of problem-solving skills that our people could use in the role of lieutenant governor. There are 4 generations of my family in West Cobb County, Georgia. 4 generations of us. My grandparents have retired here. My parents one day will retire here. My sisters and I are building our families here. This is home. There is nobody more invested in this place than I am. I want to see this succeed. I care deeply about the kind of Georgia that my children will inherit. I want to see a more just, more equal, more prosperous, not just for Atlanta, but in every nook and cranny of our state. I think we need to expand the program of putting together regional economic development plans. I think we need to get our leaders brought together. You know, look, I get 3 months. Every 3 months, I have to deliver my results to my board of directors and my investors and produce results. The Republicans have been in charge of this state for more than 12 years, and in that time, 15,000 children are in foster care. We have a rural health care crisis, and we've underfunded our public schools by almost $9 billion. I know I can do a better job.
Ms. Amico, thank you very much. That is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. And Triana Arnold James, let's begin with you.
Again, my name is Triana Arnold James, and I am your next lieutenant governor. I am a mother of 12, 8 boys and 4 girls, wife of a veteran myself, serving this country and this great state of Georgia. I'm also an advocate, advocating for Medicaid expansion, paying our teachers a livable wage, protecting our veterans, ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment here in the state of Georgia, and also going to paper ballots as well as a third-party auditing system, banning assault weapons, banning Casey Cagle, and everything else that would go against what we stand for as Democrats for the state of Georgia. We can have OBGYN clinics and pediatricians in every county, but it doesn't do the people of Georgia any good if they can't afford to pay for it. So we must look at who's going to look out for the people and not for the pocket.
All right. Sarah Riggs, Amico, it's your turn for the closing statement.
Thank you so much to the Atlanta Press Club and to our panelists for having us today. I'm coming to you not just as a mom to 2 little girls who I believe deserve equal opportunity and, of course, equal pay, as all of my nephews do. I'm coming to you as the wife of a gentleman who chose to be an American, who was not born here but became an American citizen on Turner Field over a July 4th weekend, surrounded by people from more than 100 countries in one of the most moving ceremonies I've ever seen in my life. I want my children to inherit the kind of Georgia their father crossed an ocean for. And I'm also coming to you as a business leader, as somebody who has spent the last 15 years solving problems that many of our political leaders told us simply weren't solvable. While your elected officials were talking about how to solve health care, I've been providing it to 3,500 families. While they were talking about what to do about parental leave, I've been providing paid parental leave to my employees. I will demand results on your behalf, and I'd love your support as your next Lieutenant Governor. Thank you very much.
Ms. Amico, thank you. And that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that the primary elections will be held Tuesday, May 22nd, and early voting has already begun. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club and all of the debates that they will host this primary election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website. That's gpb.org. I'm Russ Spencer. Thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Louder Milk Young Debate Series.